Okay, good afternoon again, and welcome to the Pennsylvania Association of Numismatics lecture series. Today we have John Frost with us.
I'm the president of the Barber Coin Collectors Society and education director of the Liberty Seated Collectors Club.
There you go. So there you have it. See, we adjust very readily around here. we're good. We're tough on titles, aren't we? Anyhow, John has been a tremendous supporter of PAN over the years. He educates the hobby, and that's what it's all about. That's what brings in the history. That's what brings in the collectors. So without further ado, please welcome John Frost. John?
Thank you. Talk is on why you should consider collecting Liberty Seated and Barber coinage. So I'm going to start off with a couple of questions for you. How many of you think a 1916D Mercury dime is a rare coin? Raise your hand. Okay. How about an 1893 S Morgan dollar? Okay. 1909 S VDB Lincoln cent? Okay. I will tell you, you're actually all wrong. Okay. None of those coins are remotely rare. Well, we'll get into that subject, and that's one of the reasons for this talk, is to talk about the attractiveness of Liberty Seated and Barber coins compared to other series that are much more popular. So the topics I'm going to talk about today, as far as why you should consider collecting these things, artistry, the challenge of collecting these coins, the fact that there's something for every budget, which is very important because money is a realistic, issue when it comes to collecting, the value, and especially looking forward, and also resources at your disposal. So those are the topics we're going to hit. So I'm going to start off by saying, at least in my opinion, Liberty Seated and Barber coins, especially circulated ones, which is most of them, are all different. Okay, they're individual artifacts and they are all different from one another. And this is true whether the coin is raw or whether it's slabbed. It's true even for older series than that, bust coinage and things like that. And I would say that this premise is decidedly different than what I call commodity coins. And I'm talking about white BU Morgans, Walkers, Mercury dimes, which to me at least look largely the same. So if you go out there and you see a dealer that's got 4 cases of Morgan dollars, they all kind of look the same, don't they? A lot of BU white coins. Okay, that's not true of Barber and Liberty Seated coins. So let's start off with artistry. This is what started it all. This is Christian Gobrecht's original engraving of what was known as, at the time, the Flying Eagle dollar. We now call it a Gobrecht dollar. Okay, just look at that artistry. It's intricate, it's very detailed, it's three-dimensional. The eagle is majestic, flying up in a field of stars. A beautiful, beautiful coin by most people's opinion. And it's also uncluttered. The obverse, Liberty, is seated alone. There's no stars or lettering surrounding her. It's a very clean, crisp, and artistic design. And if you take a close-up of the engraving of Liberty herself, look at the intricate hair detail, the three-dimensionality. Even her fingers are curved and rounded around the pole. Okay, she's got three-dimensionality to her body. A very attractive rendition. So when you look at the Liberty Seated series over the years, the artistry changed a bit, but it was all based on the standard motif. Originally, the half dimes and dimes had no stars. Eventually, stars were added. Then eventually, the legend was moved to the obverse for the dimes and half dimes. It didn't happen with the quarters and half dollars or dollars. In 1853, arrows and rays, these beautiful rays around the eagle on the quarter and half dollar, only for 1 year. Wish they had continued. It was really beautiful. So a lot of people look at these coins over many decades and say, yeah, this is really a nice, attractive design that held up for 60 some odd years. Now, what a lot of people don't know is that the artistry between the denominations was different. The engravings was different. And as different engravers touched these coins to improve them over the years, the artistry changed, the different engravings. So the original, this is the half dime series, the original engraving, and granted, it's a really small coin. Liberty kind of looks like she just came from the dentist, doesn't she? Kind of like a wad of cotton or Novocaine in her cheek. And then the wit drapery, a totally different rendition. The hair detail is now completely gone. The neckline is up. No more bare shoulder. The hair drapes down on it. Can't leave that exposed. Then Anthony Paquette took his turn at it in 1859, created these hollow point stars, and just a completely lifeless rendition of Liberty. And if you notice, there's a huge blunder in this engraving. Notice the pole goes up the cap. Well, here the pole stops here, but somehow magically the cape or the hat stays perched, not on top of the pole. Just a complete blunder. And then finally, James Longacre fixed it and created a very pleasing with legend engraving to finish the series. Now let's look at the dimes, and you'll see they're radically different. Well, she no longer came from the dentist, but the basics are the same. But look at the final one that Longacre did here. This is not a happy Liberty. She looks like she's tired of posing for the sculptor and like, oh, get on with it already. But it's the same engraver that did this one. Longacre did both of those. And if you look at the other series, they're all different. And that's a lot of people don't know this and really find their attractiveness for the artistry to actually appreciate the changes over the years. But again, compare these with Gobrecht's original artistry. None of them compare. Okay, so a lot of artistic merit was lost as more and more engravers tried to improve these designs. Then we look at William Barber's artistry. He did the trade dollar, was his first coin, a favorite design of many, many people. It's a really attractive design and different, but it's still a Liberty Seated design. And then we have his 20-cent piece. William knew that a 20-cent piece, because it would be close to a quarter in size, needed to look radically different, and he designed a number of patterns to look different. But in the end, the mint director overruled him and said, no, you've got to do a Liberty Seated with an eagle. And so we got the coin that was a massive failure after only 14 months of minting them for circulation. So that's as long as they minted them for circulation, 14 months. Then we look at the Barber artistry. Barber's design, Liberty had design as more of a Greco-Roman kind of style. However, while he did the final design and engraving, he didn't really have free reign here. He was told by the mint director what kind of a design was desired. So he did a wonderful job with his engraving skills, but again, he was told this is what we want. Okay, and again, with any artistry, people have their pros and cons. Some designs, I know people think this is one of the most beautiful coins we ever had, and other people, they say, this just doesn't do it for me. It's all personal taste as far as, do you like a particular rendition of something. But Barber coins really do lend themselves to some spectacular looking coins, particularly in high grade. They tone well, they have a lot of cameo contrast for proofs. They just lend themselves for having attractive coins. And this does make people kind of pull to this series. Another thing that is kind of unique to Barber's is that when Barber was designing and engraving these things, he wasn't thinking just about what is this going to look like when it's right out of the press. He is thinking 20 years from now, after lots of circulation, what are these coins going to look like? And we got a couple of famous counter examples here. These are all like very good coins. in grade. The buffalo nickel, the date, it's still visible, but it's really getting hard. The numbers are getting mushy, and the 1-9 are kind of disappearing. The word Liberty has merged with the rim. This is how the design was engraved. Okay, it's a failure of engraving. The standing Liberty quarter, the date starts disappearing in lower grades. What this stuff is here becomes kind of, what is that? And then some people say, what is that big tumor growing out of her chest? But both of these coins are beautiful when they're brand new, when they're in high grade, but they don't wear well. Barbers, even when they're down to slicks, generally have a date and mint mark. Okay, and that's not true of these series. But look at that coin. This is like barely a VG, but it's got some detail. It's kind of attractive. And if you built a set of all coins like this, it's still a fairly attractive set. But you build a set of buffalo nickels that looks like that, that's not pleasing to look at. Even the Mercury dime, beautiful and high grade, a lot of the intricate detail is at the very highest levels on the design, so it wears flat. Even though the coin still has three-dimensionality, the detail disappears pretty quickly. And so not in low grades, Mercury dimes are like, at least to me. So that's the artistry. Now let's talk about challenge. Liberty Seated and Barber coins are not going to be easy to put together. Now, if someone told me, John, I need you to buy me a complete set of Morgan dollars at this show, I could probably do it. I've seen some 1893S's here. I've seen an 1895 proof for sale on the floor. I could probably complete a set of Morgan dollars today. Cost a fortune, but I could do it. Building sets of Liberty Seated and Barber coins, not so much. It's much more of a challenge. But what's really interesting is the different series have their different challenges, and some are much easier than others. So half dimes, they ranged only until 1873 when the half dime was abolished. So the complete set is only 70 coins, and there's two key dates, 1846 and 1853 no arrows, and a number of semi-keys, the 44-0, the 38-0, and the Philadelphia Civil War issues are tough, right through 1868. But they're all doable, and it won't break the bank either. But it is still a challenge, and with some really cool varieties in there, you can make this a very challenging set if you want. But if you want just a basic set, it's doable. But it's not a piece of cake either. You will do some looking and you'll need some luck. The dimes, on the other hand, went all the way to 1891. So a complete set, excluding varieties, is 114 coins. So much more of a challenge. And there's another thing that this series has that the half dimes don't. The early Carson City coins, 1871, 2, and 3, and 4. Those coins are all very scarce to rare, and they come awful sometimes. They were made on rotten planchets that were porous the day they were minted. They had hard lives. They were really used. They fell on the ground. They were buried. So finding a nice early CC is really a challenge. You can find crappy looking ones pretty easily, but finding a nice one's very hard. Other key dates, the 1846 and 1885S. And if you want to see those, we got them on our display case over on the floor. So dimes require a major commitment and a lot of work to find nice coins, even low grade nice coins. They're hard to do. Now, you want a much easier set, the double dime or 20-cent piece. The circulation issues consist of only 4 coins, 1875, CC, and S, and then 1876. The complete regular issue set, you have to add the 77 and 78 proof only issues. But 6 coins. That's it. That's the complete set. Now, one of the most legendary rarities in all of U.S. coins is a 20-cent piece, this 1876 CC, but it's not a regular issue, so it's really not part of the set. Okay? So this is a very straightforward set to put together. But you can add varieties and die marriages to make it more challenging. The quarters. The quarters are universally considered the most difficult of all of the Liberty Seated sets to complete. 108 coins, but they've got a lot of key dates. Again, those early CCs, 1870 through 73 CC. They're rare, and they usually come really not nice. So to find a nice set, even of low-grade CC, is very, very hard. But there's also a lot of other dates, the Philadelphia Civil War dates, a lot of the S-mints from the 60s and late 50s are really, really tough. And there are also condition rarities. There are a number of dates of Liberty Seated Quarter where there are no known mint state examples. So if you find an AU, that's probably a top 5 coin for that date. And an XF is probably, top 10 or 20. Okay, so there are just some dates that just are unknown in mint state. So there was a question about the 1876 CC not being a regular issue. It was struck legitimately, but in the beginning of 1876, when they struck these, and I think it was in February, Carson City still had about 10,000 1875 CCs on hand. So they minted 10,000 1876 CCs, but they were never really needed. Now some were bought as souvenirs because no one cared. Like I want to buy the New Year's coinage. You could do it. So some were bought by visitors, some by mint employees, some were sent for assay, but they were never actually released into commerce because they were not needed. But they were legitimate coins. They're not like the 1913 Liberty nickel or the 85 trade dollar, which were complete frauds. They go to jail if they did those today. But the 76 CC was a legitimate issue, but it was never really released. Yeah, right now there's 19 known examples. Some of them are in museums. I don't own one. I wish I did. They're expensive. Now let's move on to half dollars. So again, a long series, and there is one key date that stands way above all the other coins, and that's the 1878S. Right now, I believe the total number of identified examples is 52. It might be 53, but it's no more than that right now. Okay, and the reason is they didn't make very many, and they all went out into commerce. And so survival rate very, very low. A coin that grades AG today would probably cost you over $25,000. It's a rare, rare coin. And there isn't one here at this show. There are a number of other semi-keys like the 70cc and everything, but the 78S is sort of the killer for the series. But but you can really build a set, except for the 78cc, with diligence. Okay, but again, it's a lot of work, and you're making a commitment. Another thing that's interesting about the half dollars is it contains one issue, the 1861-0, that was minted under 3 different governments. And it was the only coin the U.S. ever did this with. It was minted in January of 1861 by the United States at the Branch Mint in New Orleans. In February, it was minted by the state of Louisiana following its secession from the Union. And then in March and April, it was minted under the authority of the Confederate States of America. Even though it kept the U.S. design, this 1861-0 was minted under 3 different governments. Okay. Now, Liberty Seated dollars, another short series, 1840 to 73. There's only 44 different date mint marks in the regular issues. The key dates, there's really 2 of them, 1851 and 1852. And both of them are about as rare as the 78S. There's about between 50 and 65 known of each. Okay, and they cost about half as much as the 78S. So the 2 of them together will fund the 78S half. But other dates, like the 58 is a proof-only issue, and the early CCs, excluding the 70cc, the 71, 2, and 3, are all very expensive and very scarce and hard to find nice. But the other thing about the dollars is I would say most of the series are semi-key dates. There's really only 10 to 12 dates that you could call remotely common in this series. And the other thing about it is the price of entry into the series is expensive. There are no $30 seated dollars. They are all 3-digit coins and generally not going to start with a 1 either. A low-grade seated dollar will probably set you back $200 to $400 depending on the date. So building a set is going to be a financial challenge. Okay, but also lots of semi-keys. And then finally the trade dollars, 1873 to 1878 for circulation, just those 6 years. Then they minted proofs from 1878 to 1883 for collectors. So it's 17 coins for the circulation issues, and it's 23 coins for the complete set. Some people make this series more challenging because there's type 1 and type 2 versus reverses, and during those 1875 and 76 years, there's different combinations. So you'll find a type 1 obverse, type 1 reverse, type 1 obverse, type 2 reverse, type 2, and trade dollar specialists will often collect all of those combinations. Okay. The key date is the 1878 CC. There's about 200 of those known in all grades, 200 to 250, probably not more than that. So it's a tough coin, and most of them have problems. Clean, damaged, dented, scratched. Another thing about the trade dollar series that a lot of people do like is they're noted for their chop marks. Marks that were applied to coins when they were accepted in international commerce as being a proper weight and fineness. And so some people really love to get chop mark coins, and that's another way of the challenge, because some of the dates are very rare with chop marks, and others very, very common. But when you complete a set, whether it's half dimes or seated dollars, you know, whenever, for some of these coins, whenever you put one coin in a hole that wasn't there, that's an accomplishment. And the closer you get to completion, it's a bigger accomplishment. And you know, when you have a complete set, you say, you know, this was an achievement, and you can feel really good about it. It took me 20 years to build a set of Liberty Seated dollars. 44 coins, 20 years. It took me 5 years to get the last two. So they were the 1851 and 1852. There's a reason for that. Now let's look at the Barbers. The nickels is the short set, minted from 1883 to 1912. That's 30 years. But except for 1912, they were all minted in Philadelphia. So the complete set's only 33 coins. You have the 1883 no cents and with cents, and then just one of each, plus the 12D and the 1912S. That's the complete set. It's very doable. The key date is 1885. More and more people are collecting this series in proof because almost the whole series is from Philadelphia. So they can get a very beautiful set of proofs for a reasonable amount of money. The 1885 is not rare as a proof, but it's tough as a business strike in high grades. The dimes, 25-year series, 1892 to 1916. There's 74 different issues, excluding the ultra rare 1894S, which is generally considered not collectible. The key date, there's only one of them, 1895-0. Several semi-keys, the 96-0, the 03S, 04S, the 95P are semi-keys. Again, this set is very doable. In lower grades, this is a very affordable set. Even the 1895-0 is affordable in like up to VG and even in the fine, but it becomes very tough in high grade. So Barber Dime is not an easy set to put together, but it's doable. The quarters is by far the most difficult of the Barber sets to complete, mainly because of what we call the big three. 1896S, 1913S, and then the king of the Barbers, 1901S. These three are way scarcer and more expensive than all the others. And so a low grade 1901S will set you back probably $3,000 to $4,000 for a good. Okay, a VF will run you 20 to 25,000. Okay, it's just the key date. So a number of people are collecting this series except for the 1901S, or except for the big three, because they don't want to build like an extra fine set of Barber quarters, but have an AG 1901S in the set. They just don't want that. So sometimes they'll just exclude it altogether. The other thing about the quarters particularly is there's 15 maybe dates that are just almost impossible to find in nice higher circulated grades like VF, XF. They're just not out there. And so the big three gets all the press, but in reality, there's a lot of tough coins. So the challenge, this is the most challenging set. And it took me a long time to build a set of quarters, but boy, what a satisfying achievement that was. The half dollars, no 1916, they ended in 15. There's no showstoppers. Okay, there is no big three for the halves. The cost of the common ones are higher because they're bigger coins and more silver, but there's no killers in there. Another thing that's interesting about the series is the key dates depend. In low grades, the 1892 O and S, the 1897 O and S are the key dates. But in high grades, the 1892 O is one of the most common dates in the set because it was saved as the first year. The 1904 S is the key date, followed by 1896 S. So the keys change depending on the grade range you're looking for. Okay? But again, a very achievable set. Right now, VF and AU are the most popular grades that people are looking for. And you can find them, but the VF coins, to find them nice, you're going to take some looking, and it's going to be a big achievement to complete this set. But it's doable. Let's talk about budgets. Just a reality. Depending on your budget, you might say, well, maybe I ought to look at a shorter series versus a longer series. I mean, think about the 20-cent piece compared to the seated dimes. 6 coins versus 114. So obviously the more coins, the more money you're going to need. Another thing is the number of key dates and how expensive they are have to come into play. I mean, if you're going to do a seated half set, you know that if you want the 78S, you're going to spend 5 figures even for the worst known example. And you just have to be prepared to do that. So you may not be. Or the dollars, there's 2 keys that are each going to be 25 grand. So again, you know they're there. Even though it's not a particularly long series, it's got some really expensive coins in it. Okay. And again, the Barber quarters, the big 3 are the budget busters. Say, an AU 01S run you 40 grand probably. Okay. So not for the faint of heart. But one thing that the Barbers, as I mentioned before, have an advantage is that because of the way they were engraved, you can get down to like the grades of very good and they're still reasonably attractive coins. There is some detail in the high points visible in the laurel wreath. You know, they're just attractive. And so if you build a set of very good Barber quarters or halves or dimes, that's not going to be unpleasant to look at. You're going to say, oh, that's a pretty nice looking album of coins. And so those make the challenging series more affordable. It still will be work to find nice coins, but they won't break the bank. So something for everybody. Now let's talk about value, a lot of rarity for the buck. Okay, so I'll give some examples here. Talked about the 16D Mercury dime. 264,000 minted. Then the key date of the Barber dimes, 440,000 mintage. Which is rarer? Okay, you can probably guess what the answer is going to be. Okay, by far the 1895 O is rarer. The 16D dime in all grades, it's estimated that 10,000 of them exist. Okay, there's just a lot of demand, so they're expensive. But there's only about 1,000 1895 O's out there in all grades. And they're comparable in the number of mint state examples known. I actually think there's more than that of the 16D, and I think I'd be very surprised if it's more than 60 or 70 for the 1895 O in mint state. Okay? So which coin is rarer? By far the 1895 O. Well, let's look at the prices. Okay? In extra fine, the 16D will run you $6,000, but the way rarer 95 O will run you half that much. Okay? In mint state, they're kind of comparable in price. The Mercury, which is more common, is more money, but not obscenely so. And that's not with full bands either. I'm not assuming that. Okay, if it was a full bands, it'd be more. So which is the bargain relatively to the other? It's pretty clear. Okay, now let's compare the same dime to the 1914 S Barber quarter. Exact same mintage. Exact same mintage. Which is rarer? Again, you can probably guess. We have 10,000 16Ds, as we know. Only about a quarter of that of 14S quarters, and most of them are in low grades. There's about the same number in mint state of each, but you look at the prices. 6,000 in XF versus 1,100 for the 14S. So 4 times rarer coin is 1/5 the price. In mint state, not even close. The rarer coin is what, 1/6 or 1/7 the price of the Mercury. Okay. So you can get a lot of rarity for the buck. Why is this the case? Because the 1914S is not the key date of the Barber quarters. It's not the number 2 coin, the 3 coin, the 4 coin, even the 5 coin. It's probably number 6. Okay. So that's why it is not respected like some other dates. Okay, 1909 SVDB and the 1913 Barber quarter, same mintage. Which one is rarer? Estimated 50,000 SVDBs in existence. Why? Well, first year of issue, people tend to save the first of the new series. Also, the controversy of the initials and the fact that they were moved made people seek these coins out in 1909 and 1910. So they're everywhere. 1913, about 2,500. It's not a rare coin, but again, compare to the SVDB, and look, 6,000 in mint state versus 250. This is not a rare coin, but it's not really common either. But you look at the pricing, 1,200 in XF versus 450, 18 versus 900. For a coin that's hundreds of times rarer. Okay. So again, which is the better buy? And what I want you to start thinking about is not today, but think about 10 years, 20 years from now. 93S Morgan, the key date of the business strikes, 100,000 minted. Let's compare it to the 1855 seated dollar. There's one over in the case, you can come see it. Which is rarer? 10 to 12,000 93S's known in all grades, compared to about 300 1855s. And in mint state, 120 versus maybe 40. There's our prices. 9,000 versus 6,500, 350,000. You have a mint state 93S, forget about it. 6 figures, well in the 6 figures versus that. Okay, and again, 10,000 versus 300. One last example. The 95 Morgan, 880 proofs, proof only issue, versus the 1851 seated dollar, one of the 2 key dates. Which is rarer? Well, there's about 225 of the 1895 proofs that never were spent. The rest were probably spent, and of that, there's a total of about 400 in all grades. Versus 50 to 65, and I think it's closer to 50 for the 1851. And a good number of those are mint states. So someone put a number of them aside, and the rest went in circulation, and then the survival rate was just terrible. Okay. So no comparison as to which is rarer and which is more expensive. Okay. So when I talk about value, I think that Liberty Seated and Barber coins can give you a lot of rarity for the buck, a lot of value for your money. And again, look to the future. There are fewer collectors now than there were 20 years ago, and 20 years from now there'll be a lot fewer collectors than there are now. The more people having hair color like mine than dark brown or black out there. So at some point, collectors are going to be selling their collections. So think about those 10,000 93S Morgans, those 50,000 SVDBs, those 10,000 16D dimes, if 10% of them hit the market. So what happens when the market gets flooded with these key dates, which are not rare? what's going to happen to the prices? Okay? If 1/10, if 10% of the 93S Morgans hit the market in a given year, 20 years from now, that's 1,000 pieces. Okay? But think about the 1855. 10% of those is 30 pieces. Well, the coin's in such high demand now, those 30 pieces would be absorbed with a blink of an eye. Okay? So you just have to really think about the future, which coins are going to hold their value or go up, and which ones are destined at some point to tank, simply because the supply is way more than the demand. Now, right now, there are a lot of Morgan dollar collectors, and there are more collectors than there are 93Ss. But what if that doesn't stay that way 20 years from now? So sort of a final thought is, with the aging of the hobby, when you look ahead 10 years, 20 years, which would you rather own? A bunch of these or these? Just food for thought. So should at least get you to consider branching out if all you collect are these. But you're still going to collect what you want, what you like, what you think are pretty, what you can afford. So references. Well, there are books on all of these series. Most of the great comprehensive books are actually about 25 to 30 years old. The Complete Guide series was a great series of books written by experts in the series, and what's interesting is their information, even though it's 30 years old, is still very relevant and is widely in use. We did rarity surveys of the Barber series, and David Lawrence's books from the early 90s, his rarity ratings are spot on 30 years later. He really knew the series. And they also cover the major varieties. Okay. Bill Boogert and Randy Wiley's book on seeded halves is still the reference book for the series 30 years later. But there are a new generation of books, mainly for Liberty Seated, that are studying die varieties and die marriages and really go into a lot of detail. They demonstrate the passion of the authors, but also the insanity of the authors for some of these things. And some of these books are available online for free. So like my Double Dimes book, there's a website with that book. The Seated Dollar book is online for free, or you can buy a printed copy. And then there are the clubs, the specialty clubs. So the Barber Society, we're a nationwide club. We have about 300 members, and we publish a quarterly journal that has research articles, variety discoveries, historical things, anecdotes, stories, you name it, it's in there. So there's a lot of information that the specialty clubs provide, and this is true of any specialty clubs. If you collect Indian cents, you should be in the Fly-In Club. If you collect bust coinage, you should be in the JRCS. If you collect large cents and colonials, the EAC, Early American Coppers. That's where you get the specialized knowledge that makes you a smarter buyer and seller of these coins. So we publish a journal. Our dues are currently $15 a year. They're probably going up to $20 for next year. We publish 4 of these a year that they're mailed to our members. The Liberty Seated Club, about 600 members, twice as many members, but also twice as many series, and they're longer. The Go-Breck Journal comes out 3 times a year. And again, research, varieties, discoveries, stories. We also have a monthly electronic publication called the e-Go-Breck, which can be emailed to you or you can get off the website, that has more news, discoveries, and regular columns. Like there's a quarter of the month column. There's a quarterly double dime column. The dues right now are $25 a year. Beginning in January, it's $30 a year. But you get 3 of these all-color, large journals. Plus, the members of the club freely share knowledge. So that's part of the camaraderie. And so we do these sessions here. We have display tables, meetings, and that's really where members can horse trade with each other and really you learn from each other, and then they write the articles that are in the journals. So I hope that's given you a little bit of insight and made you at least think about pursuing Liberty Seated and Barber coins. I urge you, whatever series you decide to collect, if there's a specialty club, join it. It will be the best money you invest in anything. So, all right, well, thank you, and glad you enjoyed it. And come